Monday, June 9th, sorry, can you hear myself? What I'd like to do, we're waiting for one more board member, but we do have a quorum. We'd like to do a Form A lot review first. The person who is applying for that is in the audience, and we have the plan in front of us for a subdivision on a plan of land on 18 Berkeley Circle. So I just wanted to show this to the board and see, excuse me, Judy, if you all have any comments, and if the applicant would like to come up to the table.
Yeah.
Kind of show us what your plan is.
Okay. I'm actually working with the owner. My name is Kelly Turner, and this is for David Ulrich. He owns 18 Berkeley Circle.
I see.
And so basically what he has doing is he is moving, and his abutting rear neighbor had asked to purchase this part of his yard, which he's been using as his own for basically the past 15 years. So that's basically what this division is for.
And this person is on Ward Street,
Correct. Yeah.
and so it doesn't really change anything on his frontage.
And these are all abutting parcels, so this is essentially a
This is
landlocked piece. What is this?
conservation.
Oh, conservation.
And
I thought it was
river.
Yep.
And the fields are down there. So, looks good to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Make a motion that the planning board approve this,
Well, it's approval not required.
is it an A and R? Okay.
Yeah.
First thing we
A
do,
favorable recommendation?
I guess I'd ask the planning board to entertain a motion for a favorable recommendation for this.
So moved?
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Done.
Good. Great, good luck.
So you can use, but you need to sign it.
That's quite a pen. Word.
So the neighbor's been mowing it for 15 years too?
Yes, it's grass. and
That's awesome.
It's just the way it sits, it's just his yard, and now that the other is moving, he's pretty good.
Let's take a minute to dry.
That's nice when neighbors get along like that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You want to send Sarah a text just to see if she's coming?
Sure.
Oh, the 30th, I will not be here.
Thank you so much.
I didn't realize we had a meeting that night.
I didn't either. I can do the 16th.
Okay, that's a joint meeting for one item with the ZBA, so we'll just have to make sure that Bill and Sarah and Gary can be here. These two can't be here on the 30th.
Yeah, I didn't have it written down.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Here she is.
Sarah.
Here she is.
Gary, you can be here on the 30th, though?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, Bill had looked at
June?
the schedule. Yeah, of June. So as long as Sarah can, Bill had seen the schedule and said that all the dates were good with him. But you guys didn't vote it yet.
Well, I have 4 of the board members present, so I'd like to start, it's a 7:09 p.m., and I'd like to start the hearing with the continuation of the hearing of Global Tower Assets LLC and the new Singular Wireless PCS LLC, who are the petitioners for the property at 207 to 225 Lincoln Street. And the board will be doing site plan review in connection with special permit A3 parking determination to construct a multi-user personal wireless services facility consisting of a 120-foot cell tower on land of the Anchor Plaza Realty Trust. I'd like to start and see if the applicant has any new information, and then following board comments and questions on that, I'd like to ask the neighbors if they'd, any abutters, if they'd like to come up and make a presentation. So is there anything new from the applicant since our last hearing?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. My name is Earl Duvall, and I represent the applicant. I think the only thing additional that we have to submit, Mary, is a hard copy of the Phase 1, if I may.
And could you brief the board on what that's about for their information and for the public? Just quickly.
Just
The site itself has had a historic release of some chemicals that had subsequently been cleaned up. There was some question as to what the status was on that, and also the status of some existing groundwater monitoring wells that were out on the site. Global Tower Partners did have a Phase 1 environmental site assessment done where they acknowledged the historic issues at the site, but recommended no further action. Based on that, I think Mr. Cheshire has also a recommendation as well. I'll let him speak to that.
Sure, John, welcome, come up.
And the reason this came up, just for the boards, is that there is currently within the lease area a monitoring well, and so that, it wasn't on the initial submittal, but it was picked up in subsequent surveys. I believe Mary checked with the Board of Health, and there's no record of it actually being closed out. So there was a bunch of information submitted via email, older 21Es, this most recent 21E that was just submitted. And based on, I'm not an LSP, but it does appear, reading all of them, that it's been released, but that there should be the proper documentation filed with the Board of Health, and then the well should be abandoned so that it's capped and there's no potential for anything to get into it. The reason it was a potential issue if it wasn't closed out is when you put infiltration, if there's contamination, you don't want to put infiltration of groundwater, of surface water, to push the contaminants elsewhere. So that was what, but, so I think that if you...
John, explain that again. So in other words, if you're using the monitoring well, you're pulling water, which is explain to me how.
Okay, the monitoring well was there basically to, and there's a lot of them on the site, but basically when there's a spill, you put monitoring wells around to find out the limits of the contamination. Some monitoring wells were used in a pump and treat system. So one of the spills was gasoline. There was a former gas station on part of the site that had tanks that leaked. So they pumped the gas off of the surface of the groundwater and treat it and take it away until it gets to a level where it's no longer considered a threat. There was also a leak from a dry cleaner nearby as well, and that was treated. So if you still had a plume of gas and it went underneath, and you were then taking stormwater and recharging it into the ground, it's going to tend to push that plume away. Since it's been closed out, really they should just cap the well so you don't have any potential for something to get into a well, direct conduit to the groundwater.
John, do you know the status of any of the DEP permits on this?
There was, one of the documents had a DEP, I think, site visit in 2008 that basically indicates that the site was cleared. So I don't know that there's any more permits necessary from the DEP regarding the spills.
So we could entertain a condition that, that all of those permits are in hand and any Board of Health permits are in hand prior to capping the well.
Right. I think there's actually a permit from the Board of Health to get to cap a well, to quote, abandon a well. That's what they should get. That should be the condition you put.
And in terms of the dry cleaning effluent, has that all been evaporated, or has that all been verified?
Well, I guess it's been cleaned out to the point of satisfaction of DEP. I don't know that you can ever get rid of everything, but you can get rid of enough of it that it's not considered a threat.
Okay.
So that, and I think that was actually not near the lease area. I think it was on the other side.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% certain because the documentation doesn't really describe it that clearly.
I can speak to that, John Hazard, the property owner. Prior to my taking title of the property in 2002, the previous owner, Steve Quint, obtained an REO, result action outcome, from the DEP. And so that basically ended all regulatory oversight at that point. And to the best of my knowledge, and I'm not an LSP either, but I think in layman's terms, anything that remains is below allowable limits set by the DEP. So there's been since 2002, there's been no further actions. Once you get that REO, that basically closes you out of the system as far as DEP is concerned.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions from the board for John? Okay, thank you. So that being all of our new information, if there are any questions from the board on what's been presented right now, any further questions? I would like to, if we could, open it up to the neighbors and the abutters, because I had understood that they wanted to make a presentation.
Thank you. My name is Bob Nevins, 9 Tupelo Drive, and I'm an abutter. And we wanted to just raise the concern that we have that this 120-foot tower with a 6-foot rod on the top of it is merely 100 feet from my property at 9 Tupelo Drive. It's 80 feet from 7 Tupelo Drive, and it's 90 feet from 5 Tupelo Drive. The applicant has talked about it collapsing if it were ever to fail. There has been recent evidence in Wellesley, Massachusetts, where a tower fell and didn't collapse upon itself. So, we have some concerns about that. In addition, the applicant really never answered any questions about wind and ice shedding coming off the tower. We all lived through kind of one of the worst winters we've had here in recent memory, and obviously it's a concern for us, a very big safety concern given the proximity to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Welcome. Could I ask any other abutters or?
I have a question on
Sure.
the plume, the area of the plume. The current property itself.
Could you identify yourself for the?
11 Buell Road, I'm going to butt across the street.
Thank you.
Were there monitor wells installed in any of the residential areas, okay, to see if that plume had traveled into the residential areas of that neighborhood? Do we have any geotech information that would tell us that that's clear also? Especially where the tower, proposed tower, is so close to some of these other properties where the fall range, I guess you would call it, the tower mower or something like that would fall on people's houses. But do we have any additional environmental information about the abutting property where people live there? The additional test wells is clear? Do we know? Do we not know?
I guess I'd ask John, do you know if there's any information on that?
I don't. I looked through the reports, but that's not really my expertise. There are a lot of monitoring wells on the locals, and I believe some of them were used for pumping, some for monitoring. More in the front towards 3A, more, I guess, to the kind of which I would maybe the south or the east part of the building, sort of by Salsas. There's a bunch in through there. There were fewer up in that direction, but how far anything went, I don't know that. It must be in the report, but my assumption is that the goal was to catch it before it got off, pump it before it got too far, and then I don't know the answer to how far it got.
I just want to ask the applicant, is there any information in the report that you've just submitted or in your other investigations on the status of the plume or the status of the monitoring wells adjacent to the abutting properties?
People go to the mic,
Yeah, okay.
just so the audience can, the people.
In that report,
Probably should go to the mic because we're on TV, so everybody can hear you.
Global Tower Partners had a Phase 1 ESA done for the facility. That was submitted tonight based upon on the following week here, some of the issues that had been brought up. An executive summary of that report. Basically, it says the assessment identified no evidence of recognized environmental conditions in connection with the project site. However, the following historical recognized environmental conditions were identified in connection with the parent parcel And it basically goes on to say the historic RAOs that they feel have been closed out. It says here, according to review of MADP documents, the listings have since received Class A2 RAO regulatory status, indicating a level of no significant risk has been achieved and no further remedial activity is warranted. And goes on to say, based upon these findings in this investigation, no further action is recommended. So they acknowledged it in here that it was historic, and based on their research, and some of those documents are in the appendix there of some of these older Phase 2s and Phase 1s that Mr. Cheshire had talked about, but according to that environmental assessment that was done, there was no further action required.
So in this large report on page 12, 13, there's information relative to the gasoline plume, and then there's also on the dry cleaning. It does recommend that ongoing monitoring still happen, at least in this report. I don't know if that was in yours.
What page are you on?
Page 12 and 13. Basically, in November of '99, they did soil borings on the perimeter.
Yeah, I think all that's been closed out in 2002 or 2003. Okay. So that was the phase, I think you're reading a portion of the Phase 2 from '99.
I am, yeah.
So that identified some of the things that they needed to do.
Okay.
But I believe, and Mr. Hajar has said that prior.
They've been done.
So your understanding then is all of this has been done, and so currently anything that exists is below limits, or it's not there at all?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. Any further questions or comments from the neighbors or the abutters?
Tony Marcinkiewicz, 3 Beulah Road. I'd just like to ask that the initial tower is going to be 120 feet high. Question is, can that tower be extended in height to serve additional carriers, especially given that AT&T is right at the very top there? And if so, how high?
Okay. And that's the applicant.
Hi, Earl Duvall, counsel for the applicant. As the radio frequency engineer had testified, the minimum height for AT&T to satisfy its coverage objective is 120 feet. At this point in time, there isn't any other interest from carriers, so it's unknown as to, whether or not another carrier would come in and request, additional height. And I'm not certain that this structure would be designed or built initially to be extended. So.
Is the top 6 feet of the tower, is that for emergency services, or is 220 plus there's an additional 6 feet? What is that for?
Basically, that's an air terminal. That's like lightning protection.
Oh, lightning protection.
It's usually considered an appurtenance. You'll see them on a lot of structures around buildings and things. Depending on the zoning reads, in my experience, generally it doesn't count towards the height, but it varies from place to place. You'll see these on top of steeples and things, and sometimes, but it's for lightning protection. Certain regions, it's a must, like in Florida. Up here, it's semi-optional, but most of the time they put it because the idea is that it can help stem from a lightning strike. So.
Could this tower be just a monopole without any attached antenna?
That's not something I could answer. Of course, it could be. Whether or not it would meet AT&T's objectives, I couldn't speak to that.
If there was a recommendation by the board that it be a monopole, could that be accommodated?
I'm not in a position to answer that, but
I'm not in a position to answer that as well. I believe that as proposed, that's what AT&T needs to satisfy its coverage. It would be a monopole with an exterior mount versus a monopole with an interior mount. And with an interior mount, it'd be significantly less antennas, which would not provide the coverage objectives that AT&T is looking for. So not trying to be the RF engineer, but I would imagine that, that's why it's being presented, as it is.
And the 120 feet is a function of the range, the radius of projection?
Correct. 120 feet is the height that AT&T needs to be able to propagate out its, RF to be able to satisfy the coverage objectives.
Are the nearest poles that high? Is the shipyard on the chimney, is those poles, is that, how high are those?
That's somewhere in the materials. I think that, I could look that up.
I remember reading about it in an earlier hearing, but I just can't remember.
I don't know off the top of my head, but the one at the shipyard, it is taller than 120. I don't know how much taller, but yeah. And there's several carriers on that, several more than less than those.
Okay.
It's in the package somewhere.
Yeah, about that is a 9 below. It's 186 feet.
Oh, that one's 186.
At the shipyard, yeah.
The one that's on the water company property, how tall is
I
that
don't
one?
know that.
I'm just curious in terms of the range of these.
I don't know that.
Okay.
So the tower itself is 186 feet, and AT&T had applied to put additional antennas at 130 feet. And looking at the plan, they had reduced the antennas that had been at 186 feet down to 130. And so that's our current understanding as to where AT&T is right now.
But you had questions about
Curious.
one of the other sites?
The other one was at the water company. That's a monopole at the water company. I didn't know if
Yeah.
anybody knew how tall that was and whose carriers were on
I
that.
don't know how tall that is. I
Yeah.
do know that they're there, though.
Okay.
And just one other comment. So I think the applicant, as it's currently stated, is a pole that would have equipment at the top. So again, that, just to add on to my statements from before, that creates more danger. And I just want to submit this for the record. This is just aerial views of where the antenna will be in the proximity to the properties.
You asked a question earlier about ice shedding. Was that answered? Wind and ice shedding? Could you address that too?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we did prepare a memorandum. Mr. Marino from Proterra prepared that memorandum. It was submitted, and we were going to be prepared to present that tomorrow night. But I think that Mr. Marino could share findings.
So to answer some of these questions, what we did is we looked towards the code to see what the code had recommended, and we had found that the code that covers this type of pole, it's called TIA 222. It's a Telecommunications Industry Association standard. It's also referenced in the 8th edition of the building code, and it has designs of this type of pole look at a maximum wind speed, and it also looks at a wind speed with ice. So for this particular area, and it's generally broken down by county, the basic wind speed for this area would be between 110 and 115 miles per hour. That'd be full wind, and then a basic wind speed with ice of 40 miles per hour with 3/4 inch ice. So that's kind of the framework of the code statute. Looking through the building code and this TIA 222, which dictates the design of antenna structures, we did not see anything in there that required to look at ice throw. However, it's a good question, a prudent question. So we did some research and found an Army Corps fact sheet. They had done some studies determining fall distance from towers. Generally, those towers were very tall, 400 or 500 feet tall, guide towers that have a lot of surface area for ice to go to. This particular structure being a monopole, kind of a singular pole, doesn't have a lot of places for ice to grab onto, but of course it is possible. So we looked at this 40-mile-per-hour design wind speed with ice and this 3/4 inch minimum thickness. We looked at, based on the methodology in the Army Corps of Engineers fact sheet, we looked at ice pieces varying in size and weight between 1/2 pound and 2 pounds. And we got the ice being able to be traveled, the heavier materials, obviously a thicker piece of ice for a given size fell closer to tower. We got about 87 feet with that. And sort of a lighter piece of ice, maybe something 1/2 pound, we found that it could travel up to 132 feet. So there's a lot of assumptions in here. I would say, though, that I think the smaller piece of ice there wouldn't generally damage neighboring property. And to study that a little more, we looked into kind of what the NOAA considered damaging. So recently they've raised their threshold from 3/4 inch to 1 inch for damage to structures. So again, it's an estimation, but something on the order of 1 to 1.5 pounds would be 115 to 100 feet away, we found. Now granted, this would be a fully iced up structure in a gale force type wind. With the nearest residence being about 190 feet away, we feel that it's adequate in the location that it's in. Is it perfect? No, but we believe it's adequate. And certainly it isn't in a location far north on a mountain range or something where you could get several hundred more feet of throw. I think from the research that we also did, it's consistent with buildings, same codes govern these buildings in Boston that you walk down the street on. Certainly at the shipyard with a 186-foot tower there, and there's cars and walkways parked all around it. It's certainly consistent with those uses. So that's what we found out. We were planning to submit this. I apologize. I thought it was a question more aimed at the zoning, but I suppose we could submit a copy into the record if you so choose.
I'd like one, if we could. So on the prevailing winds in the wintertime coming from the northeast, the range of ice would be away from the residences or towards 3A or towards the commercial areas?
I don't think it'd be directly at the residences, but there's residences all along that western side, so somewhat towards them, I would say. How many copies?
One's good.
It's mostly a zoning board.
Yeah, okay. All righty. I guess I'd ask the board, any more questions for the applicant? Oh, we have the butters, yeah.
I'd like to respond to a few of those facts. The ice throw will depend on has a lot to do with the shape of the ice. The ice is being moved by wind, air, and it's wind resistance that is the force that's moving it. And the equations that determine wind resistance are based on what's called the projected area of the object that's being moved by the ice. So the larger the area, the greater the force. So you could have a small piece of ice, and because it's small, there's not a lot of projected area, like you take a circle and project it. Very small. But if up on that tower where you have the antennas and ice forms up there, you could have sheets of ice which are several feet across. And that's going to go a lot further than the distances that were stated here. The real issue is that you can't predict ahead of time because you'll never know all the different shapes of ice that might form up there. So I think you have to take a grain of salt with the information that's been provided here today about how far this ice throw will go. The other thing I'd like to clarify is I asked how high that tower could be extended, and I think the answer was that you don't know, because no carrier has yet come along and said, I need to add to that tower. So, and you don't know whether physically where that tower is designed, whether that can be extended higher. And as we all know, under the 2012 Tax Relief Act, we'll have very little say in whether that tower can be extended. So I would consider, you know, the 120 feet is kind of a minimum.
There were structural parameters as to how high it could be, right?
I'll just say this. Certainly, it could be designed to be extendable, but having talked with GTP and the managers over there, when we discussed the parameters, it was not discussed that they build it to be extendable, in this case, to my knowledge. So, yes, it could be, but to my knowledge, they weren't looking to provide, at this time, something that could be extendable. That's all I can say about that. Is it possible in the future? Maybe, but to my knowledge, they weren't looking to either build the footing or the height of the tower itself. The other thing is, if they were to extend it, they would, correct me if I'm wrong, they would have to go through the zoning process again and that whole thing. They would have to, the next carrier that came along would have to prove that they needed that height. So it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Earl, but that would be the stipulation there. So I don't think someone could just come along and go higher. You'd have to prove through RF that you needed that height to do so.
I just have a quick question for you. What do you know about the tower collapsing in Wellesley? Are you aware of this?
I can't say that I know much about that. There's lots of reasons that it could happen. Generally, when they talk about the folding, it's due to design loads that are in the code from wind, from things, but I'm not sure of the particular case in Wellesley. I don't even know what type of tower it was. Was it a monopole? Was it a guy tower? There's a lot of...
That was a monopole, and they were doing...
Why don't you come to the mic, and then we can all... Thanks.
It was a monopole, and they were doing maintenance at the bottom of the pole, and they were welding, and it set the cables on fire. And the cables are going up through the monopole, and it acted like a chimney. It actually melted at the base, and so the entire tower collapsed.
Do you happen to know how old it is, any of that information? Like, was it an old tower?
It's all on the internet. In fact, I
it.
think I submitted it to Emily, so she might have that.
All right, I'll look and see if I can find it.
So I guess in terms of the location of this tower is really in the jurisdiction of the zoning board. Does that mean that the fall separation or radius is within their jurisdiction and not ours?
Yes, they'll be looking at all of that tomorrow night, and I believe that's why that material wasn't provided to us, because the zoning board will be reviewing that, because there's a dimensional variance.
Right.
There's height, there's setback variances and a height variance, and a use variance.
Okay. But everything that was discussed here tonight could go in front of the planning board, the zoning board. They could be aware of what we discussed tonight.
Certainly.
Yeah, okay. All right. I guess what I'd like to do, are there more questions or comments from the abutters to the applicant or to the board? Any more questions from the board to either? I think, if not, I think perhaps what we should do is go through the site plan review. That makes sense.
It's on page 9.
Page 9. Here we are. Okay. I had it all the time.
I have a question.
Sure.
If, and this is more for Mary, if we approve site plan review with certain conditions, but we don't know if the variance, if the height variance or the setback variances have been granted, are we putting into place all of the conditions in the site plan that would, protect abutting properties, for example? So if, when we do site plan review, we're assuming that their setbacks and their height are in conformance with zoning, because the variance hasn't happened yet.
That's a good point.
We go through site plan review as if they were conforming on all of these other, on this crucial, I think, dimensional variance. Once they give the variance, if they were to grant it, do we get to come back and say, well, actually, the abutting properties have not been protected?
Well, that's a tricky one. The zoning board will be looking at the safety issues associated with the dimensional variances for the setback, and I understand that's where they'll be discussing this. So you have the ability to place reasonable conditions on site plan action. I understand
But
it's...
not knowing whether there's a variance or not.
It's correct. We don't know that. You have the site plan in front of you with the proposed location and the design parameters.
I mean, several of the issues that we have in front of us are, for example, enclosures for the generators and to maintain or mitigate noise, vehicular parameters in terms of convenience of safety and, movement through the site, things like that. How many of those are impacted by the location of this tower? In other words, if the tower is not allowed to be placed in a residential district, all of the other items that are related to this tower are a function of the location of the tower.
Correct.
So everything that I think, Judy made a good point, everything that we have in front of us is kind of indexed into that.
Any decision that you might make tonight would be based on this current proposal where it is. So at the end of site plan, possible condition could be any change to the proposed
Would require...
location of the pole or structures, any changes to the location of the proposed tower or configuration of structures shown on the site plan sheet A2 shall, and you could say require, a site plan modification from this board. It's kind of belts and suspenders because it would anyway, and
Right.
likely they'd have to go back to Concom. Because all of those dimensional variances are predicated on getting a use variance. And that's what has to happen first.
Right.
Good question, though. This application, as I see from your memo, is only for AT&T and Verizon as the carriers, but they have the ability to have more, right?
Correct.
Do they have to come back if they come with additional carriers?
The board could put that on as a reasonable condition.
Because that could increase the noise, right? Additional air conditioners and fans for each carrier?
Theoretically. And so on page 2, under that section, there were some of these questions that came up in previous hearings. And so on page 2, the first section where it says possible conditions, board to discuss, those are just some of these questions from previous meetings. And the second bullet down, Walter, to your point, these are things that you could discuss.
Okay. Perfect. It sounds like you're queued up.
Right. So a number of these conditions are really performance conditions that would be related to the location. And if that location was not approved, then they would have to be revised.
Correct. So my suggestion is, as you work through site plan section by section, think about conditions that would be as proposed here. And then think about an umbrella condition if anything were to change. Would you want it to then come back to you?
Sounds good.
That's a great idea. Okay. One thing that I don't have is the plan. Do you have an extra plan that we can share and look at?
Sure.
I have my other package. All righty. Well, let's start on the site plan criteria, section II, item 6. Protection of abutting properties against detrimental uses by provision for surface water drainage, fire hydrant locations, sound and sight buffers, preservation of views, light and air, and protection of abutting properties from negative impacts from artificial outdoor lighting. So I would say that in terms of the drainage issues, we had looked at those in terms of site drainage. I didn't know if, John, you had any concerns on anything from the latest plans relative to site drainage that we should look at.
I think they addressed everything. I had a couple of recommended conditions.
Yeah.
For the whole thing. I'm not sure if they show up. I think they might show up in this memo.
They're under G, some of the stormwater conditions.
Yeah, okay. Right. There's on page 3 of Mary's memo, there's a retaining wall proposed.
Yes.
That is sort of associated with some of the drainage infiltration things. So recommended condition is to make sure that it gets designed properly, that it's going to hold, direct the water properly and not be impacted by the infiltration system. Under the construction phase.
Should John come up to the microphone?
Yeah,
Mr.
sure.
Chair?
Get that information on
Why don't you come up to the microphone, John, so that people at home can hear you?
I'm so used to just sitting.
I know, sitting and talking.
Sorry about that. Okay, so back to that. On page 3, there's a recommended condition relative to a structural engineer looking at the retaining wall, making
Yeah.
sure that it doesn't leak, doesn't not impacted by the infiltration system. Under O&M, there's 2 parts to that. This is sort of under the stormwater standards, dates construction.
Yeah.
They don't have a contractor yet, so that data would need to be provided.
Okay.
And I don't know that it's listed here, but I know it was in my letter too. There was a question. Usually when the project's done, this is a bigger site, so we ask for an O&M for the site. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you generally get like a as-built plan of this, but it might show other things, BMPs, so that there's a sort of O&M package at the end that addresses what actually was done in case there's any changes. I mean, I think they did basically the O&M, and it looks good, everything's pretty much, but you want that final in case there's anything.
John, while you're up there, how do you feel about the landscaping plan?
I kind of deferred that to the board. I'm not a landscape person, per se. And I think really there's 2 issues with the landscaping. I mean, this is an existing site, and what they're proposing is really in the back in a, open grassy area. They are proposing a buffer to be extended to the neighboring properties. There's currently a line of, I believe, arborvitaes, and there's some fencing. And there's kind of a mound, actually, in part of it there. And they're proposing to extend that arborvitae line, and I believe they're proposing a solid stockade-type fence along that edge. But you might want to just look and see what's there. The other thing is that there's no proposed, how much you open up the whole site plan to other things. I mean, they don't have parking lot plantings like you would if this was a raw site and you started from nothing with the whole,
Right, I mean, I'm more concerned about the abutters. I mean, that's
Yeah,
where,
they're proposed to what looks to be, an extension of what's already there as a buffer.
I mean, what's proposed is essentially a arborvitae, evergreen shrub, large shrub buffer zone. I'm wondering, I haven't had a lot of good luck with arborvitaes in the wintertime with ice and being stable, but...
Or deer.
Is there a way that those could be hemlocks or something that's a little bit more permanent, that's year-round, that would be a really good screen, not only visually, but acoustically? It's what?
Hemlocks are dying out in New England because of the hemlock woolly adelgid. It's very hard to keep hemlocks unless you want to be treating with all kind of pesticides.
Well, those are American hemlocks, but Canadian hemlocks are resistant. So people typically plant Canadian hemlocks as a way. I mean, they're the most sturdy or hardy buffer kind of an evergreen tree that I know.
what's the one here that was planted opposite on Gardner Street? Fox Run, is that?
Those are arborvitaes.
And they're all dead.
Yeah. I mean, very salt sensitive, and they're, I think that's what did those in, but we've done Scotch pines, we've done some pines. They're vulnerable to ice and breakage over time.
So would you be willing to change those arborvitaes to a hemlock, Canadian hemlock?
Sure. Are you guys looking on A4? There was 3 different...
We're on A4, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean...
I like the idea of 3 different species, though, because it looks more natural.
If you'd like to substitute one, I don't think we have a...
So we're interested, I think, in substituting the arborvitae with the Canadian hemlock. Am I right, Gary?
That's fine, yeah.
Maybe the spacing would have to change a little bit because I think it's a bigger tree, but I think that could be worked out.
Okay.
But the size that they'll go in will be more or less the same?
Well, an arborvitae is a shrub.
Right.
The hemlock is a tree, so it'd be a little bit of a different kind of a call out, but you guys have some experience in what you want for a size that's reasonable, that you can purchase and put in. I think the applicant would be amenable to that.
And typically, 4-inch calipers, 3 or 4-inch calipers initially, but they grow up to decent size.
Yeah, they get pretty big. That's why I was saying the spacing here, I just have to look at what, see, we have like 3 in a row. You wouldn't do that. You probably
alternate.
replace it with one bigger.
Larger one.
But I think what would be in the best interest of the abutters is that when, day one, when it's all planted, that it's a full screen.
Sure.
So you might need a hemlock just to kind of, because that other tree will grow so much, you might need like a hemlock on either side of it to kind of to provide the initial, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's workable, and maybe a condition that maybe it can be, or
Another
prior to
hardy,
construction, it could be reviewed with administratively to take, you guys can take a look at it. Maybe administratively, you should look at it and make sure that there's enough in size.
Adequate coverage. Yeah.
another hardy one too is the Japanese yews, which grow well with hemlocks and/or interspersed with some arborvitae.
Are they more bushy?
They're a little lower. They're shorter, but they grow to about 15 feet. So,
Deer love those, though. Deer love the Japanese yew.
Deer.
I know deer love most of the plants they have right there. But at least it gives them a mature, year-round screen.
I think, though, I mean, that's fine. Again, we were trying to sort of work with the hedge that was there. There's a pretty good hedge there. They look in pretty good shape to me.
Right, those are the arborvitae, they've gone pretty well.
They've gone pretty well. We tried to look at what was there, but we don't have an aversion to, if you want to make a change here or there, that's fine.
I mean, the good arborvitae that are there, you could retain, and then, I can't tell from the plan which is new and which is old.
Yeah, the ones along here.
These are all,
The hedges exist.
these are all,
Right here.
that's
all
it,
along the-
that's
yeah,
arborvitae,
yeah.
but all the new, which is
That's
shielding more of the tower area, less the commercial property.
There's
That's
some
what it was.
different types of trees there now, and there's
Okay.
kind of a leaf pile and some vegetation debris and things like that there that come out.
All righty.
Would you put that down?
I would say as a condition, can we put that down as a condition, one of our conditions on item A? So that'll be the buffer, sound and site buffers.
Substitute Canadian hemlock.
I'd say Canadian hemlock for arborvitae. They could intersperse some of the arborvitae in there with the hemlocks.
Yeah, keeping in mind that we want it to be fully screened from the abutters.
In terms of lighting, is all of the lighting on, is it low cutoff fixtures on the building? Are there any site lights in here, any pole lights?
There are no site lights. The lighting that's on the structure is like egress lighting like you find in your home.
Okay.
It's on a timer, it's low to the ground. I think that with the fence, I don't think it's a big issue. Yeah, the light to the door is usually motion, so if somebody opened the gate, they have a flashlight, and you get 15 feet away, it turns on, and there's a timer inside when they leave. They usually put it to 5 minutes, that allows them to get out, lock the gate, and it turns off. But it would be something very similar to you have outside of your home, small fixture outside your door. So as far as like a parking lot or that type of site lighting, there wouldn't be any proposed other than egress lighting.
And nothing projecting in horizontally into the neighbor's property?
No.
In terms of the tower, what kind of lights are on the tower? Are they aircraft lights or no lights at all?
When you get over 200 feet, you have to put them on, and there's a process they go through to determine if lights are needed, and I believe the application came back that there's no marking proposed.
No marking lights on it, okay. In terms of sound, the generator is housed within this building. The only sound that would be emanating from this building, those two package units, the air conditioners on the side of the building?
I believe just because it's inside doesn't mean it's silent. So there was a study that was done, and the sound engineer recommended that on the fence there be some sound attenuating blankets and also some special hoods put over the intake and exhaust manifolds to meet the sound levels that are in the report there. Those are shown on the plan, and certainly if you wanted to condition it based on his report, I think that's fine by us. There is external AC units as well. They're facing opposite of the neighbors.
Yeah.
To try to shield it more.
So as a condition, we could list all these suggested conditions relative to the having vents on the building, mitigating the sound with cowling hoods and horizontal baffles.
Yeah, I believe she hit the highlights there.
Okay. And then the sound barrier shield on the fence. Is the fence a wood fence?
Yeah. It's
stockade fence?
Yeah, it's an opaque wood fence, solid board fence. So.
You mentioned the lights, I just want to backtrack for a minute, that they are like the lights that you have at your house. Can you explain that a little bit more, what the lights are?
Like, you have a front door, a rear door, you have a little light there, egress light. Sometimes they're little floodlights like you'd have in your garage, but remember the building's only 10 feet tall, so the light's probably 8 feet tall. I think we have an 8-foot fence proposed. So it's not a lot of...
And that will come outside the fence or go into the...
No, it would be on the shelter, within that fence compound.
Okay. So will the top of the light be, should it be shielded at all? Is it going to be visible from people's homes as they're looking? Or are they going to be able to see the naked bulb? Or
I don't believe they would be able to see it. If they feel really strongly about it, could be shielded, but my experience, I haven't seen a need, especially with the fact that we have that 8-foot solid board fence, and we also have the screening along that neighbor's fence. And there is site lighting there now, back the existing facility, site lighting, spotlights and things, so I doubt that a small, 60 to 100 watt bulb there would be seen over that type of large site lighting.
So the lights are, what, 7 or 8 feet off the ground and above the landing of the door, and the fence is 8 feet, so you pretty much screen it with the fence?
I do. I believe so.
Can the fence be a heavier mass? I'm just thinking in terms of the sound. You've got, is it a horizontal board, a vertical board? Is it a
vertical board
and that?
We kind of put what he recommended in there. I think the sound attenuating blanket is really what gives you the one thing about the solid fence is that there's no gaps.
Okay.
That's the first thing. Second thing is the sound attenuating blanket, that if you do get some vibrations, that it is mitigated in that. I believe he ran his analysis with that in his report, and that's sort of what we expect.
And he is the sound engineer? Who is he? Shadell, okay.
What's the life cycle on the fence in terms of maintenance? Would you have to replace or maintain every 5 or 10 years? Would you have to do serious maintenance on the fence to keep it intact?
I would imagine there's an amount of maintenance that would need to be done on a fence like that. Typically, these fences are chain link with slats. In this case, it was, like I said, based on recommendations of the wood fence, so I'm assuming it would be stained, and with that would come some maintenance of that.
Just a white cedar fence?
I'm not sure if we're specific on that.
Could I propose a condition on this, that the fence be kept in good visual and functional repair, and that the abutters be consulted on the color of the fence that faces them? I know, sometimes somebody wants just a natural fence facing them, somebody else might want it to be white. It depends on what their house style is. It's a little...
I don't think we have an objection there. I would add, though, there already is a fence in that area, but certainly I don't think the applicant has any aversion to that. They want a particular color, but I don't think they care.
The fence was put up by one of the abutters Chris Griffin years ago. He asked, and I allowed him, just as a neighborly gesture, to put the fence up. And actually, something is standing on my property.
The fence is on the lot line, though, basically? On the-
More or less.
More or less.
More or less, but there's a piece of it that,
Piece of it that goes on, I think that's shown here on this plan.
Yeah, there's a chain link fence that generally follows the property line, and I think he's referring to, there's a stockade fence in a couple of spots there.
But you're going to replace a fence along the entire property line that has this blanket on it?
No, the fence would be in the...
Oh, just
compound.
around the compound?
Yeah.
This is the rectangular fence
Yeah,
around
it's
the
about
building,
30
Oh, I
feet
misunderstood.
property line.
around the
Okay.
tower.
Oh, then I take it back on the painting part, because it's within the landscape barrier.
Yeah, so we're proposing not to take down any fences that are there. There'd be the landscape buffer, then there'd be some space, there'd be the landscape buffer, there'd be a little more space, and there'd be the solid wood board fence.
Right, okay.
Approximately 30 feet.
Okay. Well, then just that it's just be kept in good visual and functional repair.
Like you two talking about
The other one,
Right.
yeah.
So we have a couple of possible conditions on testing of the sound. I think it's a good idea to, requiring, sound testing in the future, requiring a maintenance plan on this fence so that the integrity of the fence supports the screening, but also the sound mitigation.
Mr. Evans, you
Oh, I
guys-
didn't see you, sorry.
Can you come to the mic, though?
Put your hand up first.
Hi, Joan Nevins, 9 Tupelo Drive. Just before we move on the lighting, there had been either discussion or in one of the reports that additional safety lighting was going to be installed. So I'm wondering, when you say there's only an egress light, what's happened to that plan for additional safety lighting? And what exactly did you have in mind for that?
I'll let John help me here as well, but that was offered in there because I believe he's having some problems behind his facility with some tagging. So there was, I think he said that they were going to try to put some better lighting. This would be not where we are, but behind his building itself, and maybe some cameras, but I'll let him speak to that.
Refresh my recollection.
If that's not on your plan, that's not part of this agreement,
My voice is fairly loud, but just
unless you want it
sake
to
of
be.
formality. I think actually, we've had a lot of problems in the past, excuse me, with tagging. A lot of spray painting has gone on, and we're constantly, painting over it. In fact, there was one person who was caught, and a condition of his probation was that he actually pay restitution for the cost of painting the damage, painting over the damage that he caused. So we proposed, and actually, I think my property manager's in the process of putting some lights on the building to, create some more lighting back there so that kids won't congregate.
So this is lighting that would be on the edge of the parking lot?
No, it's going to be on the building.
On your
My
building
understanding is it's going to be on the building,
So it's not part of this?
It's not part of this.
shining down, right, it's not
I
part
see.
of this.
I'm just trying to think in terms of lighting at the
I'm
end.
doing, that's a project that I've undertaken to do independent
Right.
of this
But
project.
is that something we should be reviewing?
I mean, is graffiti on
planning
on the
board?
I
back?
think that's the building commissioner at this point, right? I mean, that's outside of this project, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering if, where it falls in. Have you done any permits for it? Because you're putting lights on, it's changing the plan, you should probably talk to the building commissioner.
Yeah, I think my property manager did,
Okay.
or talk to.
All right, just make sure, because,
Will do.
Is there lighting at the perimeter of the parking area that is the access point to this fenced-in facility that would need to be provided to, for
There's some
security
parking in
and
the back.
graffiti?
There's one light, I believe.
Just curious what how dark or bright, how dark is it in
Yeah,
the
so on
back
this
area of the
pole, on
parking
this
lot?
pole here,
There's lighting there,
there's lighting here, yeah, that's,
and that shines away from the
it
residences.
shines away from the residents towards the building. I believe that's, yeah, light pole there.
So there's a light pole here,
Yep.
and do you know what the foot candles are in this
I
general
don't.
area?
I don't. I know that they are flood lighting, so it's not, it's a light that's on a pole tilted heading towards the building.
So people are recognizable and cars are recognizable back there, so there's some deterrence for people, congregating?
Yes. Yeah, some now, but in the very back of the building, there's not access all the way around the back. No, you
Oh, I
can't
see,
go out
yeah.
around the back of the building, so
Yeah.
that's why kids congregate back there.
Now, you can walk back there, there's a fence, and it's a narrow area back there. There's some kind of dark spots back there, and
We just want to exactly fill in the dark spots.
there was also, I believe you had some problems with people throwing trash there, so one of the mitigations that we did for conservation was to remove the trash and to try to help keep it from happening again. The owner had offered to try to, I think he was planning to do it anyway, but to help with that is to put some lighting there that would at least prevent kids from hanging out there.
Okay.
No guarantees, just try it.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Oh, you didn't get a chance to go yet.
It's 11 Bureau Road. I would just like to make a comment here, if I could. AT&T is in the process of buying out a very large company in the telecommunications and cellular business. And it's my sense that ultimately, these antennas won't be necessary, okay, maybe the next 10 or 15 years, and I think that will come upon us. I think the board should consider conditioning that if those antennas become abandoned in the town of Hingham, that they have to be removed at the expense of AT&T, and the area should be restored to the owner's property. Okay, I see it coming, and we're going to see a lot of antennas with nothing on them, and I think we should be prepared, or we should at least condition henceforth, we can't do anything about anything else, but to remove the structures.
Good point.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you. Good point.
I would add to that, that in many instances, the jurisdiction does require us to have a removal bond, which we certainly agree to.
Okay. So we can put that in as a condition on here? Okay. Just kind of summarizing here on A, we talked, I guess we've talked about positive surface water drainage. We can get to that subsequent down to one of the other areas of site plan review in terms of specifics of the retaining wall. Are there any points we've missed under A? I like the idea of the list of conditions here, the possible conditions. One, to require sound testing in the future to make sure that things are on track.
Which future?
I'm thinking in the future of this facility or any additional carriers or installations that come into this site at this.
But as a condition, I think we need to put in a time frame.
In terms of a frequency of inspection or testing, you mean, or do you mean a end?
Well, yeah. Like if it says,
You're thinking maybe on a yearly basis, or?
no.
No. You're thinking a maximum time frame as, 2 years out, something like that?
Or
What did we do
when
at
the
the
site
high
is
school?
operational,
Yeah.
and then
Once it's
they're
up
supposed to
and running.
report back by, I think, July 1 to the planning board. And, the board could require a test when the site's operational.
And then if there's
And then
any change.
if there's any change, they'll come back to you again. You would have the
Okay.
opportunity to require another test.
That's fair. So
And the-
when they get there, they're fine, they're complete, and we have the O&Ms, and they have a C of O at that point, then we can do testing? Is that what you're thinking? Part of the C of O process?
I think that the board needs to specify when you want the test done and the intent of the test. We have testimony that the decibels would be less than 50 to the nearest property line. So we need to know when we're testing and what we're testing for.
And that, I just want to make sure I understood that. It was less than 50 decibels at the nearest residential property line, not the not the structure, but the line.
Can we clarify with,
Because I think we should make that the condition of the testing, is what the goal is and when it would be met.
Yeah, as part of the original application, I believe it was
is Exhibit Tab 18, which is the second study. Jesse's taking a look at that. But what we generally see is that the site is live, then we would do a test to demonstrate that we are
Right.
at the level that we've proposed that we're
Right,
already at.
right.
And then in the future, any time that changes are made to the site, if those changes would impact the sound of the site, then we would also do a study.
And what kinds of changes are those? Like a change in the generator
Right, additional equipment that would
or
generate.
a change in the generator?
Anything that would generate sound.
So replacement of a generator or additional generators?
Correct.
And additional generators are based on additional carriers. All right. So we basically have sound testing at completion when the facility is live to make sure it's less than 50 decibels at the property lines.
Well, he's checking to see what the
checking.
real number
The
is.
report says on page 11, if I'm looking at the right spot, talks about 48 dBA or less at the nearest residence to the proposed equipment,
Right, I think it's at the residences, because I think earlier on,
not at the property line, it's at the
right, it
residence.
says that the zoning bylaws of Hingham, there aren't quantitative noise standards for this type of facility, only believe covered industrial. So then he went to the DEP standard, and the DEP standard is at residences, and that's for, I believe, 10 decibels above the ambient. Maybe what I would say is, because we're not all experts here, maybe that it be tested after, after completion in accordance with the projections that are in the.
That it meets the projections, because on page 10, table 3, you have the highest projected decibel
Yeah,
is 50.
yeah, and you see the increase +5. I think there's a limit, and then there's an increase over ambient, so.
So we would need to have the testing done to ensure that when it's operational, that it's meeting or below this report. And I would have to have an expert look at that, because I'm not an expert
Right.
in this.
And you guys did that with the fields, right?
With the sound, we did, yes.
Right, okay.
So when we say 48 decibels to the nearest residential property, one property or two are much closer than the other properties. And this is nearest residential property to the tower or to the property line?
I
Tower.
believe in there, they state which ones, right, that same page, 10 or 11, it's got a table of how far the residences are away.
It does, and it's to the residence.
Yeah.
It's not to the property line.
And it's 48
It's to the
nearest.
residence.
Okay.
So the condition, to be sure, it's when operational.
And then if there's a change in the existing equipment or additional equipment is or other new equipment is added.
So what we're saying then on the second condition, for installation of additional generators for additional carriers then would come before the board, because that, any change
If there's
comes
a
before the
sound.
board. If there's a sound change, it comes directly to the board, not handled with a building permit only.
So installation of additional generators or equipment for additional carriers.
I would say.
Okay, I want to go back to the first part of that condition, just to be sure I have it. Installation of additional general or equipment would require site plan modification. Okay, so the first part about the sound testing, could you
So
tell me?
that's, I think it was 40, per the report, it was 48 decibels at the nearest residence.
I'd suggest we not put the number
Not the
in our
number?
condition, but just reference the report.
Report, okay.
When operational, when the facility is
It's
operational,
operational.
sound testing.
And I think that there's a related sound test for additional carriers, that if we have 2 or 3 additional generator buildings, that the sound is the same as if we have one. You could have a situation where if you added 2 carriers, 3 generators would create 60 decibels. So what we're saying is maximum, no matter how many generators, it would be 50.
Yeah, I believe, I'm not sure if that's necessary, given the fact that wouldn't they have to come back
They'd have to come back.
anyway, so, I mean, I guess you could put it in there, but my understanding is it would be more if AT&T changed out their generator for a bigger one, or they added some other equipment to the shelter that made noise, that would be the kind of change you want to capture, since I think you already have you were talking about a global condition that if another carrier or somebody came, that they would come to you. And I think at that time, somebody would have to do another study and prove that you're saying thresholds.
Okay.
Well, I think we're just talking about sound testing here, and I think we would do the sound testing when this is operational and when additional equipment is added. And that would come on the other one, but this way it's clear that the additional sound testing happens, that this is part of this permit for the sound testing. Because you might also experience need to replace a generator, and in that case, I think you want to get the sound testing done when you replace it also.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. I think
Okay.
For AT&T, I was just saying that you may want to not, don't say for any.
Don't be redundant.
Any future carrier.
Yeah, I don't think about the carriers. This is just a equipment-specific sound testing.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Anything that's added that wasn't in the application or considered, yeah.
Then we
We revisit it.
would get it tested again. That would trigger a second.
Okay. All righty. We discussed the landscape buffer, some changes there. I think we have that one covered.
Yes, sir.
And then the lights on the utility building, if they're if they're lower, at the same height or lower than the fence, then they would be shielded from outside.
I think so. I think it's reasonable. The kind of lighting we're talking about is, like you'd have in your home. Either small spots or small egress lighting, just enough to somebody get safely in the door without
You're not talking about high wattage
No.
type stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, should we go to B?
Please.
Convenience of and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site and on adjacent streets, location of driveway openings in relation to traffic or to adjacent streets, taking account of grade, site distances, and distances between such driveway entrances as the nearest existing street or highway intersections, sufficiency of access for service, utility, and emergency vehicles. In terms of, we're not making any changes to the Lincoln Street Route 3A part of this site access point, so what we really have here is just access in the back. And the access in the back is really service access for this. It's not public access.
Correct.
So the only question I would have is, if it's an oil-fired generator with a single generator in a single building, that's one truck. If there are more carriers, I guess down the road, we'd revisit it if there's another carrier in terms of adequacy for service and turnaround and the like. And I'm assuming that any of the in terms of the oil service, are there oil sand separators out there in the back of the parking lot where these trucks would be accessing this point?
Not really. There are catch basins, or a catch basin in the parking lot, but it has essentially no sump. I mean, it's literally like less than 6 inches probably from the invert to the bottom. So there really isn't any way to fit a hood or anything in it.
So there's protection for the oil stored in the building to the double-walled tank.
Right.
But there isn't anything in the parking lot. Should we do anything in the parking lot?
And we looked at it, and the only thing, I mean, you'd have to replace structures to do that. You'd have to dig it all up and put in a bigger thing in this. I mean, you could consider that. We didn't. We looked to see if there was a way to put a hood on it. There really isn't. And, the O&M sort of means they're going to clean it more frequently or whatever, but I don't, other than replacing structures, which seemed a little outside of where they're working for this particular piece. I mean, I guess you could, but we didn't think of it, looking at it, that seemed
Should we put a condition in as to more frequent cleaning of these?
I think that's in there.
It is in there.
Yeah, I think that, well, quarterly inspections would be required. There actually wasn't a lot of dirt in them when we looked at them.
Okay.
Some of the pipes, there might have been a couple of things in some of the, it was a fair bit of work to actually figure out what was out there, because there's pipes that go under some of, the building, but they figured it out, and I think that was a big step. So now at least there's a plan, where everything is and how to clean it. If there's some change to the the retail or the whatever, the facility itself, then it might make sense to do some upgrades to that, I would think.
All right, thanks.
They fill internally too, inside that room, the generator is on top of its belly tank.
Okay.
And that's a double wall tank, and so the refilling would occur inside the structure as opposed to outside.
So there's nothing below grade here, it's all,
No.
I see, so that's safer.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe so, yeah.
All right. All right.
I think the frequency of fill too is not even as much as a home. Home, you have several, unless this thing was for an extended power outage, you're only looking at maybe once or twice a year when it gets filled.
So it's about 150 gallons or something, like a day tank?
It's about a 200-gallon tank, but yeah.
Okay.
So, and that can run continuously for 48 hours, so I think that unless you had an extended power outage, you're generally talking a few times a year, so I think it's at or below what you
So the risk is low.
normal oral fire burn home.
Okay. Does the board have any comments or questions on item B?
I would just say we now have a noise ordinance in Hingham, so maybe you just want to say on this, as far as service to the site would be in accordance with the town's noise bylaw. And that puts times on deliveries and things like that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Should we go to C? Adequacy of the arrangement of parking, loading spaces, and traffic patterns in relation to the proposed uses of the premises, compliance with the off-street parking requirements of the bylaw. The special permit A3 was applied for because this use was not specifically covered in the parking table. The applicant has stated that one parking space is proposed for the facility and no other significant changes to the existing parking area are proposed. Curb stops are not indicated on the back perimeter. The applicant had stated earlier that they would interfere with snow removal efforts if they are installed adjacent to the grassy area, as the grassy area is now a snow storage area. So I guess 2 points. One is on the parking spaces, there's one proposed. Is that used by the service trucks when they're in there?
Yeah, I would imagine. What we did is we looked at one of the spaces that's back there now, proposing to kind of cross-stripe it to maintain open access to the fence. And that would be used by any service vehicles. And there is room to stack two in front of each other if they had to, but generally we wouldn't get more than one or two vehicles there any stretch of time.
Is the snow that's being placed in this area on the grass, is it the snow from the whole parking area to the north of the Reebok and the Planet Fitness buildings? Or is it just the snow that's adjacent to the spaces that are serving, or the edge of the pavement that's serving this access point?
I believe it's pretty much adjacent. But part of the process with conservation, we went through a little snow storage plan. And when it gets to a certain height, they have to truck it up. So now, because they don't have a lot of areas to store it, which we did, which they do. So I think what they did is we found some areas in the plan that they could pile some. When it got to a certain height, they'd have to remove it. There's a plan they put together, and I think they had to actually truck some last year. The big thing is they don't want to pile it out by Route 3A because there's this issue. So what we ended up doing in the back, when we first came in, the fenced area was square, and it was much closer to the edge of the existing parking spaces. By making it rectangular and offsetting the pole in it, it allowed us to get about a 25-foot space there that we could maintain some snow storage that they currently use. So that was the idea. And we felt that
Originally, we had curb stops there, but then because we provided that area for snow storage, and the drainage actually drains back towards that catch basin, that it wouldn't make sense anymore to put the curb stops in. We certainly could, but we felt that it would impede snow removal, so we proposed to take them out later.
So the curb stops are on the northern part, there's 6 or 7 spaces on the northern part of the site
Yeah.
here, just at your access point to the facility?
There aren't any there now. Originally, when the fence was closer, we were proposing this curb stop to be sort of kind of a barrier so people didn't run over and hit the fence, but now that the fence is back, we really don't have an issue. It makes more sense to keep that open to allow the snow to be piled in and removed later if need be.
So can we just reference the conservation's snow plan?
Yeah.
And waive the snow stops, the curb stops?
That would work.
Okay.
Okay, and also on the snow storage, there isn't any leaching of salt or anything into the neighbors' areas or the existing landscape buffer?
Yeah, they don't use salt within the compound.
They don't, okay.
Yeah, they generally, the only snow removal that happened is just a shovel to get to the shelter and by the door.
Okay.
Inside it would remain.
Okay.
You know, if it was an icing condition, maybe they could throw a little salt, but it really isn't a significant issue. They just would shovel the door to be able to get it out.
Okay.
Have you submitted an updated parking table for the site?
On the latest plan, it's in there.
Up on the upper right?
Yeah, it's on sheet, there's a whole parking plan in there.
It's in the set that I handed you.
And it has that extra stuff.
P1. And basically, we found about
There's 4
240
extra
spaces.
spaces.
And that agreed pretty much with Ralph's account. I guess you guys, in the last year or so, really went through that. We got about...
We did, and I think that we've hit it a couple of times in the last 2 years, and we've always had a problem with what's on the ground not matching up with what was on the plan. So I just want to make sure that at this point, everything is the same as what you have on the plan.
My understanding is they came back a couple times to fix that. On the plan that we found, there was one spot that we found that wasn't striped, but I believe we showed through photos and such that there were real spaces. We pointed out on there where it is. I think subsequently they've remedied that. But.
So I would just make a condition here that the what's on the ground matches what's in your plans. And there was also an issue with the width of the driveway adjacent to the Reebok CrossFit not being a 24-foot width, I believe.
That's at the back of the store, the north side of the store?
Yeah,
This right here?
that back corner. Do you have any more information on that?
I believe that's been resolved.
It's all been resolved.
Under the last, I think they had to go back, and my understanding is they did an as-built plan and submitted that.
Okay. Okay.
My understanding is that it was pointed out, and I believe...
I think everything is in conformity with the last
Okay.
site.
So then we'll just say that the parking plan and the dimensional requirements on the lot are all consistent with this plan.
Yeah, a lot of this was based on, we did a count out there, and then there was an as-built C100 parking plan that was submitted to you guys.
Right.
And, it was maybe June 2013, something like that, about a year ago.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that your concerns were addressed on that.
Okay.
And you referenced that plan here, this C100 plan.
Yeah, I thought that when we were doing the previous application, the parking aisle between
Right.
Brugger's and the street was not compliant. But that's not being changed as part of this application.
So you're saying the aisle that just after you come in from 3A, that aisle between Brueggel's and the double-loaded spaces there, you're saying the width of that isn't compliant?
It was an existing condition.
I see.
So there were a couple
I just want to make sure that the aisle, the width of the drive aisle going to the back of the building, at the corner of that building, and at the front of the building are in compliance with our
Yes.
dimensional requirements. So if we could
Yes,
just
they are.
put that
They're
in.
24 feet.
Right, okay, great.
One question I have looking at the aerial, the overlay. There are several parking spaces that are used by vehicles but aren't striped. They're 172 to 179. Would those be striped so that you maintain the, what we have is the required parking is 235, and we have 240 available, but that assumes the use of those that aren't striped.
Yeah, I think what I said was, we didn't see them striped out there, it was during the winter.
I see.
And we submitted a photo that showed, there were legitimate spots, and I believe even with those three, even if you didn't count them, we had a surplus of 4, so even if you took those 3 away, we believe it would be conforming.
Okay.
We just show the owner where the location, I believe, so there's 3 spots here, that's also there, where people opt to park, but I'm not sure if they were striped or not, so. Well, we should have striped.
Okay, great. Okay. Any more comments on C? So go to D. Adequacy of open space and setbacks, including adequacy of landscaping of such areas. We talked about plantings that are proposed to supplement the existing vegetation.
There's a condition on the next page that looks,
On the next page. So this
you
condition...
really consider.
Okay, when planting the holly, applicant shall plant shrubs of both gender to facilitate fruiting. This would be beneficial and add habitat value without additional cost. So the plan indicates 4 holly trees or shrubs. I didn't know where those were, but are those along the neighbors' property lines? Four hollies?
I think the point was so that they will flower.
That's a good point.
We don't have a projection for that.
That's a good point. Could you do that as a condition?
Sure.
Sounds like it's manageable. I'd also do that if you did Japanese yews, I'd plant them the same way, because they bury the same way as the hollies. Okay, so we'll put that in as a condition. Any other questions on D, landscaping? E, adequacy of the methods of disposal of refuse and other waste resulting from the uses permitted on the site. Is there anything that's generated on the site, any trash or anything, or is it?
Generally not. Like I said, it's an unmanned facility. The only trash generated would be if a tech comes and replaces a part. They usually carry in what they carry out. So there really isn't, a lot of that stuff. I mean, I think they'd be amenable to a condition that you don't store any trash on the site.
And no parts are stored on the site.
Occasionally you do see that at sites. You see people leave antennas and things.
People will leave motors if they...
All sorts of things. So,
Right.
I think that's reasonable if that's a concern.
Why don't we say-
Especially if it's opaque fence. I mean, just to say that they can't store anything there.
It's good condition, we could add that. Okay. F, prevention or mitigation of adverse impacts on the town's resources, including without limitation, water supply, water facilities, energy and public works, and public safety resources. First point is the project owner's PCS facilities and unmanned private and secured equipment installation. It is only accessed by trained technicians for periodic routine maintenance, and there does not require any water or sanitary sewer service. So there wouldn't be any toilet facilities or anything?
No, they're only there an hour or something, so it's not, they're not there for the time that we would have facilities there, so. And there's no water proposed. So.
The next item on the impacts on the town's resources is the modifications on sheet A2 to the ground test well. And we discussed earlier in the meeting, according to the Board of Health records, this is an old monitoring well connected to a DEP RAM plan, release abatement plan dating back to a gasoline discharge in October '87, for which we understand the paperwork has not been closed out. Now, in your report here, is your sense that it has been?
Yeah, I think we submitted that because we felt that we feel that the person that was hired to do the phase 1 determined that they believe it has been properly closed out. The only thing that we're going to add, and I think Mr. Cheshire said that, is that you need to get a permit to properly just plug the monitoring well that's within the lease area. It's pointed out on the plan there to abandon it, but there is a permit process locally for that, so you'd be amenable to that.
So this, is this the local permitting process through the Hingham Board of Health to close
My
that well?
understanding is that you need to get a permit through the Board of Health. They would come out and look, and they got to put like a bentonite plug in there so that that pathway becomes plugged and you can't get contaminants out, going down the well, because it's basically a straight shot to the groundwater.
Okay.
So there's a proper way to abandon
Yep.
it.
So we could propose that as a condition that any of the wells located within the fenced in the PCS facility lease area could be a condition here that the permit would have to be obtained from the Board of Health. And any coordination with DEP, further coordination on the status of these wells as well would be the responsibility of the property owner.
Correct.
Okay. So what we've got here as a condition is summarized as the applicant or property ownership shall obtain all necessary local Board of Health and State Department of Environmental Protection permits before capping or modifying the well as identified on sheet A2. So it's a reasonable condition. Okay. Item G, assurance of positive stormwater drainage and snow melt runoff from buildings, driveways, and from all parking and loading areas on the site, and prevention of erosion, sedimentation, and stormwater pollution, and management problems through site design and erosion controls in accordance with the most current versions of the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection stormwater management policy and standards and the Massachusetts Erosion and Sediment Control Guidelines. So what we have here is the Conservation Commission reviewed stormwater in depth and the existing storm drains were video inspected as part of that review process to locate them. And so we have an order of conditions issued by the Conservation Commission on October 14th, 2014 for this project as proposed.
April.
April 14th, 2014 for this project as proposed. So in follow-up on our discussion earlier on the site, on the retaining wall with you and with John, what we're saying is they're suggesting as a condition that the retaining wall should be designed by an approved structural engineer such that the design prevents flow under the footing or through the wall to maintain the integrity of that. Are there any other conditions relative to positive drainage that we would need, John?
I think of the next one.
Or is it?
Yeah, actually.
The top of the next page.
Oh, here it is.
The two, I think there's prior to construction, they need to provide all the contact data. That's listed here. And then post-construction, any updates to the operation and maintenance plan as a result of any changes to the plan. Those would be the two
Okay.
conditions. Everything else looks okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. So our condition as stated there was that prior to start, same what you've just said, is that prior to the work, they'll file with the planning board a construction phase O&M plan. And what we've added here is that post-construction, the O&M manuals will be submitted.
Post-construction what?
Post-construction, we'd receive the operation and maintenance manuals.
And was there an as-built that we should ask for with the post-construction report?
Yeah, good point.
Basically, what you want to get is the plan that shows where all the structures to be maintained are that goes in that.
In the fenced area.
Well, actually, the whole site.
All set.
There are ones that were completed, but I think he's saying if there's any alterations.
Updates as needed.
To to complete the circle and provide a final document that can be used.
And in this, is there a frequency of cleaning those catch basins? That's all in the O&M?
That's all, yeah.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. H, protection of the natural and historic features, including minimizing the volume of cut and fill, the number of removed trees, 6 inches caliber or larger, the removal of stone walls, and the obstruction of scenic views from publicly accessible locations. Doesn't sound like we're doing anything in terms of tree removal.
There's very little along there, but I think what we're removing, the intent is
Less than 6 inches.
to reach.
and then replace
Store
with
the push back
landscaping.
floor.
Is there anything on cut and fill? I noticed the grading in the back.
We do have a retaining wall, we are filling a little bit, but I think as John will test, that was all previous fill there.
Yeah, we got test pits in it. That's all altered in there. In fact, if you even go way out, there's old foundations.
So we're not changing anything from the existing? Or
There's grading, but it's
not changing walls or anything else that's out
not,
there?
there's nothing, there's not much natural with that.
That whole area there, there's evidence, you walk in the back, there's old structures and things, that historic use there. It's not a virgin area. There is some fill, but I think there's all that area historic material there. So as far as changing, I think it was changing natural character, there's little of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So is this a reclaimed commercial site in the back there?
Looking at that report, I believe that some of that may even have been part of the shipyard.
That's what I'm thinking.
Might have been
Yeah,
rail yard or something.
I don't know the history there, but I do know out in the back that there's some very concrete things. It's not, at some point in the past, it was used for something else other than what it is now.
Parking and retail? Okay.
You know any history about it?
I can't tell you, because I was clearly disturbed in the past.
Yeah, that's all I can really say. It probably predated the homes there. I'm sure it was all part of the.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but it definitely was something. And the still, the test pits were like 4 feet or more in places of just fill.
Okay.
Random.
Okay. Minimizing the, going to I, minimizing unreasonable departure from the character and scale of buildings in the vicinity or as previously existing on or approved for the site. I guess the only thing is the height of the tower, I guess, but that's not our purview. I guess other possible conditions to consider in conjunction with the site plan. I think the first one I would add in is what Mr. Higgins suggested, that should the tower be no longer used, that it would be removed by the owners.
Within how long?
What is a reasonable, of course, I don't know how long it takes to shut one of these down if they change technology or if we were to go to another type of system or they were to do an acquisition, AT&T, with another series of carriers, how long would it take to decommission a tower like this? 2 months, 3 months?
Yeah, generally what happens is that, jurisdiction will require us to do a removal bond, anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000, to remove that. And I think a reasonable amount of time would be, within, 3 months of, abandonment.
Okay, all that.
Yeah.
So I
What
have,
constitutes abandonment?
No longer in use.
No frequency coming from the tower.
No longer.
No tenants.
Is it?
Oh, no tenants.
Abandon the use of the site. Very easy.
No, but abandoned can be construed in various ways.
Yeah, that's
So I think that, so the site is owned, the site is owned by GTP, not by the carrier. So the onus is on GTP to, if there are no carriers on the pole, it would be considered abandoned?
Correct.
Okay, and that with that bond would be posted for $30,000 until such time that the pole is removed,
Yeah,
not to exceed 3 months.
I think what I would recommend as a condition would be that we would get a estimate from a company to have that removed, and then do a removal bond pursuant to that.
Upon abandonment, you would do the bond for the,
No, we do the bond now.
now. Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
so I have, if antennas are abandoned, meaning there are no longer any carriers.
If the site is no longer used as a
By a
communications
carrier,
facility.
yeah.
Okay.
So they would post a bond now for the cost of removal that would go into play if the tower weren't removed within 3 months of such abandonment.
I usually see within 6 months, but
6 months sounds fine to me.
I think you just want to give them time to decommission.
I mean, if it's the middle of the winter and you can't find
If you
a,
have a bond, I think 6 months is fine.
The idea is that if you discover that they're not, that it hasn't been removed, or it's not being used anymore, there's the city, there's a bond to be able
to access.
force them to act, or if they don't, right? The bond pays for.
Right.
It's in the event that Global Tower says, we're not going to remove that, or they're bankrupt, or they don't have any money.
Right.
There's a document, there's means in place for that to be.
But given that there's live equipment in this tower and it's susceptible to fire and or lightning, it would be maintained during the 6 months when it was no longer used. It wouldn't be just abandoned.
No, we're talking about abandonment as far as use goes.
Use. But maintenance and service would still happen.
Well, it depends on where if Global Tower Partners is non-extant, I don't know about
They'd
that.
probably just lock the door and
Then the
nobody else
town
go
would
there.
exercise the bond and try to remove it immediately.
Property owner would also have, rights, I think, too.
Correct, they're leasing this area from the property
All
owner.
right. So they'd be.
You have
I'm
a
just thinking-
question?
Mr. Higgins, yeah, in the back. I think we're good. Yeah.
If you need to get a deconstruction permit or anything like that, and those can take sometimes, depending on conservation mitigation issues of the deconstruction, it could take 6 months or so. Be a little liberal on that. Now you bond for 6 months or a year,
Yeah.
it's not a big deal.
Okay. Sounds reasonable. Okay.
Can I read you what I wrote to be sure that I have it right here?
Sure.
So I wrote down, if tower is no longer in use, GTP shall remove facility within 6 months. And then I also have applicant shall obtain estimate for and post with
The town.
a removal bond prior to the start of construction.
Okay.
And should we reference this, this demobilization? What was the permit that you recommended? Was a demobilization permit? Mr. Higgins, when you were suggesting the 6-month permit?
Yeah, sir.
Oh, you were suggesting a demobilization? Is that what I heard? Deconstruction
Yeah, when
permit.
you tear down a building or any structure, you have to go through the building department.
Right.
to get a
Demolition.
permit.
Right, so it's a demolition permit.
It's like
Right.
you have to put it up.
Okay. Okay.
You don't have to condition that unless you
Yeah.
want to.
No, I was thinking more of the cabling and the communications wiring and all that, which is not really part of the
That has to be
per se.
removed and signed off before they do the deconstruction anyhow. So
Okay.
there's a process that they have to go through.
Yeah, they have to do make safe, you have to go and
Right.
get the electrical turned off, and that's part of the demo permit.
Okay, good. So the only other two conditions we had was subject to application for and receipt of all other required permits and approvals. And then secondly, any changes to the location of the proposed tower, configuration of the structure shown on the site plan shall require a site plan modification from this board. It's really a function of what happens tomorrow night, I guess. So any changes that happen tomorrow night, then we'd have to go through a series of modifications to reflect
Well, changes
those.
to the location or to the configuration of the structures, but I think if there's any small changes, they don't need to come back.
Not the parking or any of those ground conditions, it's really more the structure.
Well, and this would be in the future, too, if the use variance were not to succeed on the residential property, and maybe the applicant or the town suggested moving it to another location on the property. That would then have to come back to you.
Okay, it's reasonable.
Just to go back, you wrote one of the conditions is no longer in use. Maybe we should be more specific and say, no longer in use as a wireless telecommunications facility. So we don't get into arguments over what constitutes use.
Hanging laundry
That's
on
true.
it.
Good point. Kite flying,
I think that would constitute abandonment.
yeah, I agree. Okay. I guess, are we ready for Motion on the site plan approval? I guess, would somebody like to make a motion on that?
Sure. I move we act favorably on the Global Tower Assets LLC and New Singular Wireless, PCS LLC, 207-225 Lincoln Street.
With the conditions.
Oh, with the conditions stated, yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we have the list of conditions that Mary has, okay.
Question, Mary, do you have to also address the A3 as well?
Yes, that's
Right,
next.
the board does that next.
That was next, and on our list of things. Thanks for reminding us. So on the special permit A3 parking determination, our understanding is that a special permit A3 was applied for because this use was not specifically covered in the parking table, which is page 78 in the bylaw. The applicant has stated that one parking space is proposed for the facility. No other significant changes to the existing parking area are proposed. The parking area has some existing non-compliant aisle widths, as was discussed during the recent Ralph's Liquor application process. I believe that we talked about that, though, tonight in terms of those two aisle widths that would be compliant. I think there were two, right?
We talked about it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, and then the other issue is one parking space behind Reebok seems to have insufficient backing room due to the existing location of the dumpsters. Is that something that can be resolved? What space is that? Is that on the north side of Reebok?
16.
Oh, I gotta look at that photo. Page 16.
No, it's P1.
On P1.
I think it's 16.
Parking space 16 is on the far right. And so where is the dumpster? Is it south of 16 towards space 1?
No, we see where it says existing container there.
Oh, that's where the dumpster is, okay.
And then next to that, there's also the location. Just checking.
So I don't see any spaces numbered next to the dumpster, so,
No, that, right there, right now, there's, one of them is going to become the telecommunications.
space.
And then what's there now was the Reebok previously had I don't know if it's been removed yet. Possibly removed. But they have like a shipping container there that's going to be removed. So I believe there should be room in that spot to move the dumpster. Does that seem reasonable?
Because there are two dumpsters shown on EX1 in that location near the there's a storage unit and two dumpsters.
When that storage unit comes out, there'll be space there to move those.
I see. So the dumpsters will go where the storage unit is on the north side. And those are,
The storage unit's coming out, that's going to do it. That would be, traditionally, that was a dumpster.
I see. And that's next to your access
It's
location?
Right adjacent to it.
Yeah.
So I think they've committed to removing the storage unit. So
Okay.
I think once that's removed, the dumpsters slide
Into that
spot.
space, okay.
That was the historic spot for the dumpsters anyway.
In the corner of the lot.
I think it becomes a non-issue.
Okay. So we could just note that would be resolved accordingly. So with the development of this facility, there'll still be 4 surplus parking spaces on the property as P1 indicates. I think that's correct, right? 4 surplus spaces?
You can if you
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah, that's what we found, and we did the research, and we also, Emily helped us out too, in going
They
through
would
the
have to
counts.
have been changed.
Basically, she pointed us to the as-built, I think from May or June of last year. We started that as a basis. We went out there and made sure that the counts were consistent, and we pointed out the spots that we thought weren't, but I think they've been addressed.
Okay. A couple of issues that we've had from earlier items in the hearings. The one was no additional parking lot plantings are proposed. Right now, this lot, the overall lot as configured, doesn't have any trees at all, and it doesn't really have any islands either.
It does.
It does?
I put an island in last year with 2 trees.
Oh,
Right up here.
up here, that black line is an
I
island.
remember we talked about it.
Okay.
That was like the only spot on the site where they could fit
Right.
one.
Are there any other areas that we had requested, or is that it? Basically,
was
that's
it.
all we can do? Okay. There were some other issues. One is some zoning violations on the site. The building inspector issued a violation letter to the owners of the storage units, and there was a stated intent to apply for relief, and was wondering what the status of that was. There wasn't any
Well, I believe
application submitted.
the container in the back, we bought CrossFit's containers in the process of being removed. I believe the other container, whatever storage facility is owned by the South owner of Salsa's.
Okay.
He's applying for special permit,
Okay.
and the old garage there, that was going to be
The tree area.
right at the period of the remediation. That was constructed, and that will be coming down. That will create, I believe, a couple extra parking spaces too.
So prior to, would it be a reasonable condition prior to the start of work, any of the outstanding zoning violations would be resolved with the building commissioner? Just to get the slate clear? Would that be reasonable? Okay. And then the next item is on an item on memo of May 12,
Just
2000.
one caveat there. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what the process is for that special permit. That's between my tenant and the, the permit granting authority there.
Well, not if he's in violation of, I mean, if your property is in violation of zoning, that's between you and the building commissioner.
Right, but the building commissioner said just have him apply for a special permit, which I believe he has done.
Okay, so then this, but once he gets that, then construction can start.
Okay. I don't know, I mean, I don't know what the status is now, but I know he's working on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that'll be brought up to date before the construction. Then also, we discussed curb stops at the north rear side of the parking lot relative to removal of those to facilitate snow storage. Are all of those curb stops required to facilitate the snow storage, or is it just 2 or 3? I'm just curious. Is the snow storage along the whole northern edge of this parking lot right now?
Yeah.
Typically use that whole area?
I would say along there, there aren't any there now, and I would...
Well, there are no curb stops there
There are no
now.
curb stops there now, it's not like we're removing them.
Okay, so it's just the edge of pavement is the delineation of the parking lot?
Exactly, yep. I think originally our plan was to add them because we're a lot closer, and as we discussed, since we've moved it back and kept that area open for snow storage, I think it makes sense to not add those.
Okay, so it's really, the waiver for the requirement of that is a functional one where we can't have the curb stops and still have the snow storage. Is that a reasonable condition or a reasonable reason not to have them?
It's a dimensional requirement of your bylaw that the curb stops be put in. So if you are amenable to not requiring them, you need to waive them.
Okay.
So that would be the appropriate thing. You discuss waiving the curb stops and talk about where and the reason why.
So I think that's what Gary was doing, is just giving us the reason why, so I think that...
So it's spaces 1 through 8 as listed on P1, and the reason for that is a functional reason relative to placement of the snow.
In accordance with the Conservation Commission's approved snow removal plan.
So we have to vote separately on the variance.
Right, okay. So I guess I'd entertain a motion to waive those, is it 8 parking spaces?
So I move that we waive the requirement for curb stops in the area of the cell tower.
So it'd be the north
Proposed.
spaces 1 through 6 on Plan P1.
Okay, sounds good.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
All right.
And there are no other parking spaces between the access way and the containers, from what I can tell, in terms of the plans.
Well, one of those becomes the access to the tower.
Yeah. And the other is...
container comes out, and the
Other 2 containers go in.
containers slide around.
Okay.
All right, so can we go forward with the last?
Yes.
All right, so I move that we act favorably on the special permit A3 parking determination in accordance with Section 5A. I don't think I need to read this whole thing.
But the condition, with the conditions we discussed.
With the conditions discussed.
Okay. So moved. A second, I guess.
Although we didn't, what was the condition? It was just the one waiver, right?
It was the
You
waiver.
voted a waiver.
And also the significant issue of having the violations resolved before the building permit.
Significant.
And that the parking aisles to be compliant from the main
Right.
entrance to the rear of the site for the emergency access.
Okay, so there were three.
Perfect.
So this, yeah,
Three conditions on that, okay.
this is for
Which they are
JTP
currently
Global Tower
compliant.
Partners.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, I think that closes our site plan review on the Global Tower asset submission. Look forward to tomorrow night's hearing. Thank you.
Good luck there, neighbors.
We always wish
This guy does a good job over there maintaining that property. I'm looking out my back window all the time.
Good job, property owner.
He does. He does. He's been responsive to...
just give him a hard time.
He's been responsive to the board's requests all along.
Pile of material right there, please.
See, when you congratulate one, you automatically alienate another,
Yeah,
you
you
know?
can't be personal.
It's a sticky little wicket. When the elephant in the room is the location of the town.
Right.
Okay,
All righty, shall we go on to our next item of business? Thank you. Thanks, John.
are these off at this point?
I think they're on. So it's 9 o'clock, we're an hour and a half late on our second item on our agenda, but that's okay.
It is?
Not really, but discussion schedule for the future hearing of the shipyard traffic look-back.
I did actually lay out for the board, well, actually Karen did. We have this in front of you with our future schedule.
Okay?
And so at this point, we have a joint meeting scheduled with the zoning board for July 28th. And so it seems that would be the...
Thank you.
It seems that would be the first time the two boards will be together for a full meeting.
Okay.
And so we had thought that we would do it that night.
True.
And we'd probably do it at the end of the meeting so that the business is done and if people want to keep talking.
They can. And on your calendar, in graphic form, it shows a meeting on July 21st that's not listed on the written copy. Does that mean there's no July 21st meeting?
I added that today for Gary's correction, for Gary's correction.
So it's on the...
Yes. The meeting is not done.
But we're done with...
The cell tower portion of the meeting is done, but if you're recording the entire meeting, we have a little more business to do, so you should stay.
Yeah, we're on our second...
Thank you, we just want to clarify.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They prefer to
I don't think
record.
we need it, do we?
They have a policy of once they start recording a meeting, they don't stop the recording typically until the meeting's over, is my
So
understanding.
we're on our second item in the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, so when would we discuss this again, Mary? I was a little unfocused there. The,
So the traffic look back, the first time the zoning board and the planning board is together.
Yeah, it should be in your plan.
Check under here.
maybe it's in here? Ah, here it is, sorry.
So we were looking at July 28th.
Okay.
That will be the first time the two boards will have a full night together.
And on July 28th, there's basically three items on that agenda. The Beale Street Special Permit A2. Now, which site is that on Beale Street?
190. yeah.
191. And so we do the, with the ZBA, and then we do the shipyard traffic look back, and then also the Lincoln Building. Interesting.
Yeah, the applicants had indicated that they would like to try to make a July agenda. They have not submitted yet, so they obviously need to make the advertising deadline.
Okay.
This is just to kind of show you what's on our radar.
Sure, great.
So that would be on July 28th, and be sure to let the HDIC know and the traffic committee and the select,
Okay,
we'll spread the word on that.
yes, great.
Now, since the question came up, Ms. Sneath brought up the schedule. So the tentative planning board meeting dates schedule in front of you was revised today, but it's for discussion by this board, and what I'm hoping is I can get some information from the board on which meetings are confirmed.
Okay. So the 16th, we had, that's already gone out in terms of the public notices, right? So we've confirmed that meeting and those 3 items on the agenda.
Correct. You have
Sarah will not be here for that meeting.
We'll miss you.
On which night?
The 16th of June?
Of June.
Okay. And
I
then
have a
our,
conflict that I'm going to try and move on the 16th, and I should know by tomorrow.
Okay.
Oh,
and then our next meeting is the 30th, which is 2 weeks after
yeah, I
that.
know. 16th,
Oh, sorry.
the 16th, I'll be driving down from Maine, and so, how did the 16th and the 30th get on here all of a sudden? Are these new proposed meetings, or have they
No,
always
they've
been
been
part
on
of our
there.
schedule?
They've been on, the 16th and the 30th were on there from the time it was originally.
Okay. Well, I will make it on the 16th then, but the 30th I really can't.
I can't either. I'm away the 30th.
I will be in another state as well, but the 16th I'll just have to change my,
So on the 30th is the, so there'd be, is Bill available on the 30th?
Bill told me that he was available for the original version of this.
Of the,
He said all the dates looked fine with him.
okay. So we'd have, Sarah, you could come on the 30th?
I am available on the 30th.
So there'd be at least 3 of us on the 30th, so we could do that.
So we have Bill, Sarah, and Gary. And for that, there's a quick meeting with the zoning board for an application for a special permit A2 for a kayak rental
Oh,
pilot down at the Harbor Master's dock. It will be a
Interesting.
small scale, I think like 6 or 7 kayaks. And so we've actually optimistically allocated 15 minutes for the zoning board and the planning board for that, I think. We're very short, half an hour.
I think you got to do at least a half an hour.
Oh, you did half an hour?
Yeah.
So very briefly, and then the zoning board has to break away because they have another SEB hearing that night.
ah, okay,
We have an advertised 7:30 meeting as well.
okay,
So that will be, I mean, we're compelled to keep to that schedule.
sure, okay. And Cushing Street starts at 7:30, is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay.
And then there's also a pre-application meeting. The applicant, we have 2 pending FRDs. Now, the one on the 30th is tentative, so given that we may be short of some of the board members, I might be able to push that one off,
That would be good.
if that's what the board would like me to do.
It'd
Since
be nice
it's
to have
still-
all of us there if we could. I mean, more of us there if we could. So if we could push it off, it'd be great.
So I'll see if I can bump that one.
And is the advertising, the public advertising for that is by the 16th, it's 2 weeks,
For the FRD?
FRD?
That's not an advertised hearing. Your
That's not.
FRD regulations begin with an informal pre-application meeting
Oh,
with the
okay.
board.
Okay,
That's in order to save engineering money. The applicant
Okay.
comes and meets with you, and I send out an invitation to all other applicable boards.
okay,
Come.
okay, good.
So it's not an advertised.
All right, great.
So the one on the 16th, though, was confirmed. The one on the 30th, I can push to maybe the 14th, July 14th.
Sarah, I think, will be on a college trip at the 14th. I'm going back to look at colleges, just because I,
You going back to school?
like to do it again, yeah.
You going back to
Yeah,
school?
it seems like so much fun,
For
doesn't it?
PhD?
Yep.
Okay, so no
Going to
Sarah.
graduate again.
That'd be good, a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, it's not absolute yet, but I'm pretty sure that's when we're heading out.
No Sarah on the 14th.
Yeah.
Do I have the other board
Of
members?
July.
I'll be here.
Okay,
I'm here, too.
okay. And so then we have the 28th was the first time that we could get the 2 boards together,
Wow.
given their heavy schedule and your schedule. The meeting on the 21st was never on there before, and that was something to discuss with the board. And maybe we should save that till after you set the rest of your meetings, and that was with the application load that we have. Does the board want to try to identify a night that works for everybody to not do applications, but just try to talk about some of the potential bylaw changes? Or try to fit in the bylaw conversations around the applications, but given our projected application load, and there's a couple other pending things that aren't listed here, you may not end up getting to have your proactive bylaw conversation if we don't schedule a night just
Well, one of
for
the
that.
things that's happened in the last couple of years is if we do the bylaw or other planning kinds of discussions, not related to applications, on an application evening, we usually get to them about 9 or 9:30, and we're on a second wind, and then we never really get to really fully discuss them. So I like the opportunity of, if we could do it on an extra night, if we could just focus only on that without applications, we could probably control the timing a little bit better and cover everything. We would be, would we schedule, what, 2.5 hours or so?
We would schedule, it would be the board's preference, but we still do have to set what meetings you want in August for applications. And the previous version of this calendar had one on the 11th and one on the 25th. And I had a comment from a board member that said the week of the 25th was not a good week for a meeting. So I need guidance from the board if you want one application meeting in August or two, and when.
It seemed that the last week in August before Labor Day was kind of a vacation time, or at least...
Could we call the 11th for sure, and then add the 4th only if we need to?
Of course.
And on the 11th, we were going to do... Yeah, so that sounds reasonable. Gives us a break of a week in between the 28th and the 11th.
So if we have time on July 14th, or, well, we can wait till next week to talk about the bylaw when we have the full board and how, but that's something for you all to think about, how you want to approach.
Right, and there'll be one, I mean, the next week I will be missing. I'm leaving tomorrow morning for South Africa.
Ooh,
for 2 weeks.
Very cool.
4:30 a.m.
4:30 a.m.
I don't feel so bad.
Well, yeah, I am chaperoning a trip, so it's not quite.
Yeah, I don't feel so bad.
Well, you got some responsibility, you know?
Yeah.
When do classes finish?
Make sure that the
Sarah?
rhino don't, I had my
Right.
last meeting today.
So last class today?
Last meeting. So
Last
I finished
meeting.
last week, yeah.
Wow, great.
Sounds wonderful. So
Yes.
you won't be here the next Monday?
I won't.
So you're gone for 2 weeks. You'll be...
I'll be back on the 25th, yeah.
Wow.
Have fun.
And they, but, okay, so you know Sarah. All right, so right now I have meetings for June 16th and 30th, July 14th and 28th, and then August 11th. And those are our scheduled meetings at this point in time. And July 28th will be joint with the Zoning Board of Appeals.
So nothing on the 21st?
So maybe we could do the bylaw changes on the 4th if something should arise that doesn't fit on the 11th? And just decide that we're not going to meet on the 21st of July?
I mean, a meeting to discuss potential bylaw changes doesn't have to be noticed. So the board, you can wait till it gets closer and see how your application load is and your schedules.
Okay. I think Bill is going to be away for a long time.
He'll be here next week, though.
Oh, he will.
We'll have a full board on the 16th. Well, not Sarah now, but.
Right.
So what we're saying is no meeting on the 21st, and no meeting on the 4th, or an optional meeting on the 4th?
I thought that I heard an option for a meeting on the 4th,
That's what I
but
thought.
Yeah, otherwise somebody would have to wait, if they don't make it into the 11th, they have to wait till September 8th, but it seems
Right.
too long.
it does. And if July 14th ends up being a short meeting, maybe you could discuss some bylaw then, too.
That's a good idea.
You know, it's the board's preference.
Okay. All righty. Sounds good. Nice to have this in front of us. We can plan. All righty. Let's see, shall we did the Form A. The minutes, shall we look at the minutes? Does anybody have any changes to the April 7th minutes? Or the May 14th? April 7th minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of May 14th as written.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
We have the other two sets.
We have the other two sets, of course, I can't find mine, but it's all right.
Well,
They may in the
your
package.
other packet.
There, I know.
Didn't get to them.
I know, and I didn't bring, oh, here they are, here, here's April 7th. And here's May 5th. What have we got, April 7th, and we've got May 5th. All right, let's get April 7th. I wasn't at that one, so I can't review it.
I don't have one. I think the minutes of April 7th seem good. So I move that we accept the minutes of April 7th, 2014.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
And now we have May 5th, right? Yep, May 5th. The one item that I had on the April, I like the minutes of May 5th, but as a follow-up business item, we were going to do a publication on the RMD marijuana article, because there's a lot of confusion, and I guess at the town meeting, people got two articles past it and said, well, oh, wait a minute, what did we just approve? So we should probably put something together on that, and I don't know who would be, how should we do that?
I thought there was discussion that night that Chairman Ramsey had a nice written summary, so
Okay.
we were going to ask him to
Okay.
Yeah.
submit it to
Sounds
Carol
good.
Meyer. I can follow up with Bill on it, and
Terrific, that'd be good.
we can pull something together.
Okay. Does
He's
any-
been away.
Does anybody have any issues with the May 5th minutes?
9 don't go.
Guess I'd make a motion to approve those.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's minutes. That's good. Okay. The next item is close two review accounts, and these are the,
These are just housekeeping items. I'm just going through a lot of our accounts.
sure.
So one is the Derby Academy, which we have $802.50 in an account. They're wrong down, we're not, I'd like to send them the check. but-
Okay.
And the other one is Gardner Woods, it's just to close the account, there's a zero balance.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we vote on those?
Yes, it is.
Would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I move that we close the accounts on Derby and Gardner Woods. Derby
Second.
Academy.
I'm going to abstain on Derby Academy.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, those are the accounts. We talked about the meeting schedule, June through September. Let's see, you want to do the reorganization of the board?
I think typically we vote when everybody's present.
Yeah, I know.
I know
thought
last year
that
we
too.
did.
Yeah, so we'll defer that to when Billy's back. That's fine by me.
I'm okay with you taking the vote next week without me, or 2 weeks, or whenever it is next week without me.
Oh, you won't be there next week.
I'm
How
okay
could I
with that,
forget?
though.
Well, although we'll all be here on the
28th of July.
28th.
I think July 28th.
14th, we'll all be here, right?
No, Sarah.
Sarah may be on the college visit.
Oh.
It's possible. Annie's doing the schedule right now.
Billy did say that it was okay to vote without him present, but I don't know if that's...
Yeah, he told me that he was fine with whatever the board decided. If you chose to vote tonight, he didn't have a problem with that. If you want to wait till the board is complete, it would be the 28th.
He was very clear on what he thought, so I think I'm comfortable voting if he says that's fine.
I think I'm comfortable, too.
All right, so can we go ahead? Judy, are you all right? All right, I nominate Gary for chair of the board for the next year.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
And I nominate Sarah to be the clerk of the board for next year.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye. All right,
Thank
there we
you.
go.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We'll try to keep time management as one of our top priorities.
Yeah, I didn't do a great job this meeting, but it was...
And I have 3 really short things at the end that came up, so.
Okay. We're trying to do better every meeting.
It was a hard one because
This
there's
is-
so many sort of outstanding things. So
It was, yeah, it was.
Could have gone a little faster, but we'll work on that.
Yeah.
That site plan hearing was so long ago that
Right,
it's...
hard to remember.
And it is difficult to know what's our purview and what's not. It really is on this
Yeah.
one. For me, more than any other issue.
Yeah, I would totally agree.
So the
Okay.
the Historic Districts Commission needs the planning board to recommend 3 names to the Board of Selectmen to fill a vacancy, and at the planning board. The selectmen technically appoint, but they want your...
Sure. One person who I've discussed or asked if she was interested, and she's very much interested, is Virginia Tay, who was on the Historic Commission for 6 years, and she was the chair for, I believe, 1 or 2. She was also the chair of the, and still is the chair, I should say, of the Hingham Bucketown Book Committee, and ongoing. There is a, I believe on the 14th, Friday is the 13th, I believe it is, there is a, out of Sturbridge Village, Old Sturbridge Village, there's a grand opening of the, they're doing a special exhibit at Old Sturbridge Village on the Hingham Bucketown.
They'll be the following week.
Is it the 20th? Did I
It's
get the week
twen-
wrong?
Yeah, you're 1 week ahead.
Uh-oh. So it's it would be Friday night, the Monday,
20th.
Tuesday, Wednesday, the 20th of June. And it's a pretty extensive presentation, and out at Old Sturbridge Village, it'll be something to see, be worthwhile going. But I would, I know I was going on tangents. I would recommend, I'd like to recommend or nominate Virginia Tay for one of the representatives to go on the District Commission, because she's been on the Historic Commission, and she's very knowledgeable about the historic districts and, you know.
And I asked a colleague of mine who's retiring, Norma Atkinson, who is a history teacher and lives in Crow Point, has been a resident here for many years, has not been on a committee before, but I think may be very interested in it. So Norma Atkinson.
There were several other people that I talked to, but they are doing other involvements, so they...
I have Betty Foley is sending me a list of names of people who might be interested in planning issues in town, but she wasn't able to get it to me today, from talent bank applications. So I may be able to come up with another name, but I didn't know of anybody offhand. So if anybody is watching this at this point and you are interested in planning issues in the town of Hingham, please speak up.
I have somebody in mind, but I haven't spoken to him, so I'll do that and I'll get back to the board.
Okay.
What is the time frame, Mary, for this process? When do we have to have names in?
Chairman Lauder was hoping that the board would produce names tonight, and I would send a memo. I think that they're anxious to be sure that there's a good transition.
Okay.
Well, maybe we can add a name by Friday and send it? What do you think?
I think that's fine. I'll defer to the board.
Be good to have, I guess, a group of names people who submitted talent bank applications so that we can see if there's somebody that we haven't thought of who is definitely interested. We want to, encourage that interest. So I'd be amenable to seeing a number, list of names and potential candidates. And I think by submitting the talent bank, they've expressed their interest, which is good.
I'm not sure why we just don't go off the talent bank. I mean,
Right.
But I don't think Norma's thought about it before because she's always been working, so.
Right, some people need encouragement.
Yeah.
But it is nice to try to involve people who express interest in being involved and people who have not been involved before, who just need a little suggestion. It's entirely possible. So could we, if Walter comes up with one and I come up with one, just send them 4?
Correct.
And that way we don't need to vote or anything. We just each send a name and send 4
That's
by
fine. So
Friday.
I'll wait, if the board's comfortable with that, I'll wait to hear from the remaining 2 members. And then I'll see, I copied Mr. Ramsey on this as well. He hasn't responded yet. But if he were to provide a name.
I know that Virginia Tay submitted a talent bank application, so.
Okay, because I had heard there was only one talent bank application that actually called out historic as an area of interest specifically. So that must be who that is.
Well,
I asked for just any planning issue. I figure there's all kinds of, historic always comes up in Hingham.
Any planning in Hingham involves historic, so.
I think so.
Okay, so that's good.
Okay.
Okay, I have 3 very quick things. First, just a point of information. In going to the Hingham Downtown Association meetings, parking availability, supply is always a concern. It seems to fluctuate as to how big of a concern it is, but now with the recent development at 99 South Street, it's primarily occupied in the pending Lincoln Street building. Concern levels are rising again about where, if we're going to encourage residential downtown, where is everyone going to park? How is this going to work? And so at the meeting the other day, we talked about trying to secure another parking study. And so MAPC does offer free parking studies. However, when I got back to the office, I was looking at the 2009 parking study for the square, and it was very thorough.
Well,
and
Jeff Dirk, right?
Correct. And at the end of the parking study, the comment was that the tenant table, like the land use table,
Should be kept up to date.
should be updated periodically, and that they should also do occasional counts because, just to gauge. It says, in order to ensure that the parking model remains relevant to the uses located within the business district, the base land use information should be reviewed and updated on a periodic basis. In addition, parking demand observations should be completed on a periodic basis and the model recalibrated to ensure the projected parking demands approximate those experienced within the district. So this was 2008, printed 2009. We're 2014, and there has been some change down there. So I, just as an FYI, I sent an email to this firm, and I asked them to provide a cost estimate. And so what I wanted to ask the board, I'll get that estimate in, is that something that the board feels this is timely?
I think we should keep it up to date. And I wonder if we should get a second estimate, maybe from a college student who could just go through our records for the last 6 years and update that model. It doesn't seem like, they really did. I remember when Katie first started using it, it seemed like it's just an Excel file with the use and the parking determination for each property. And so it's just a matter of, okay, which uses have changed in the last 5 years, and did that mean a change in the parking? And then we would have, what the model gives you is how many spaces are left.
Right. We could, it's not difficult to necessarily update the land use. I think where the expertise would come in would be to have someone go out and say, okay, now go see how it's really working.
Oh, yeah.
To do the actual
Sure,
counting.
sure.
And to follow the same methodology as the last time.
And it may be that, whether we decide to do it or not, that with an upcoming application for a significant residential development where there is none currently in the downtown area, that we're going to have to discuss it anyway.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot.
I mean, we would have to, in accordance with the bylaw, we'd have to, residential development would have to lease space that's privately owned in order to accommodate the vehicle count requirements for that development.
Correct.
Whereas the retail and any of the commercial uses are basically under the formula for the on-street parking.
Yeah, there's
So,
some question,
yeah.
and I don't want to get too into
Sure.
specifics on that one because it will be before you.
Sure.
But there's some discussion about what's grandfathered and what isn't. There's really no parking except for on-street for some of those buildings down there. So it's really the residential.
But that's where
use.
that model is very useful.
So I will get back to you with what I find out about that, but based on the concerns that I'm hearing, I thought that that might be timely.
Within the downtown overlay district, has there been a noticeable increase in the amount of mixed use, residential in some of the buildings? No, not as of yet?
Not during my tenure here.
Okay.
There's been a turnover of shops.
Shops and retail, yeah.
Some service, massage, there's been different tenants.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. But there's been a lot of discussion about how do we get more people downtown and encourage apartments, and so that's a very real concern for the merchants downtown.
Under the original bylaw, if a residential property was, its use was changed to retail or commercial, it could no longer be rezoned back to residential. Is that still the case?
It is, but these apartments on the second and third floor are still there, just because they're not occupied, they're still
there, okay. All right. Just wanting to understand the constraints. Okay.
So the other quick item I just want to tell you is that, again, in discussion with the downtown, Michael Clancy and I have been talking with them for over the past year about potential bylaw or ordinance changes related to signage or outdoor display of material, and that's all just kind of a work in progress. We're doing it in support of the Downtown Association. If there were a draft to come forward, it would be put forth by them, but I just want you to know that that's underway.
Sure.
And then the other thing, very quickly, is that bringing you back to Black Rock. Last December, the board approved a lighting plan for Phase 4, if you may recall. And at that time, and this is the Phase 4 lighting plan, at that time, you were only looking at Phase 4, and there was a discussion by the board and the applicant as to could they use the same approach to doing the lighting in Phase 3 and have an actual designed lighting plan by a consultant. And if they did that, you would like to see it. And so I have that here that I just wanted to show you. And at the time, you basically had said that you wanted to see that the lighting in Phase 3 was substantially in conformance with the design for the lighting in Phase 4. It was done by the same consultant with approximately the same spacing. I did talk to Matt today and asked him to check and see if the proposed Acorn Dome had an option for some shielding in the event that that came up as a desired feature.
Did they present these two because they are making a choice, or is it a combination of one lower, one higher?
Right. The one is for the
End of the
street light,
driveways.
and one is for the end of the driveway. And I think it's that little one that's the end of the driveway.
Right.
Yeah, the little one, the end.
So does this one have a cap on top?
It's dark sky compliant.
Right.
So the question I just asked him to look in is if there's a way, I think it's called a shroud. So say if you live next to one of those and you say, you know what, I don't want to see it from my house, can you put a shroud?
Well, particularly this house here seems to be in the,
range.
Yeah, fortunately for
Foot
this
candle.
house, they have the driveway. I mean, the garage blocking
Right.
them.
But the first one on coming in on the PH-1B plan is in the actual windowed area of the house.
That's already approved, that's the
This-
phase 4, this is phase 3.
Oh, I see, I see, phase 3.
Right.
So are we supposed to approve this plan?
No, the board didn't indicate that you wanted a formal application. You just wanted to see the plan, see that it was designed, and that it was substantially the same as
Right.
the approach for Phase 4. You didn't want a dramatically different approach. So this is kind of the report back to the planning board.
So what we have is that any change in alignment of the roadway, there is a light, and so as you're going down the road, you can see these transitions, and it's, the foot candle range is pretty low, it's 1.8 at the brightest, which is, that's safety level, which is fine. It's quite dim in between the lights. I don't know what the spacing of these is it 150 feet?
Looks about 200 feet. The scale
200
is
feet.
1 inch equals 60,
So
I believe.
they're 200 feet on center, which is, it's basically what they are on Main Street.
It is about every time kind of the road.
Every time it turns, you have an indicator, so it seems okay.
So I just want a consensus from the board if you feel that Phase 3 was done.
It looks similar to me.
Yeah.
Seems fine to me.
Okay. And I promise that's all I have. that I'm
Great, thank you.
for.
Thanks for all of your assistance and preparation. It makes the meeting flow, especially on an article where the hearings have been 4 months or three months apart. It's sometimes hard to remember everything. Sign all these, yeah, I need a pen.
It seemed like that site plan one was so long
It
ago.
wasn't so long ago, it's hard to remember what happened in January.
Are we adjourned?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's adjourned, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, thank you.
Everybody.
Where do I sign this?
Sarah, I wish you a fabulous journey
Yes.
despite my green face.
And safe
Congratulations.
travels, too.
Congratulations.
For goodness sake.
How long a trip is?